welcome to the show. Welcome to the Plurals special show. Uh, as you know, the Plurals is having a series on uh, India 79. India 79, Freedom at Midnight, Lost in Daylight. So that's the question we have posed to a range of experts across the country. And today I'm having with me one of the major experts on environment, somebody who is kind of equated with the Himalayas in this country, Professor Jayanta Bandyopadhyay, a scientist, economist, environmentalist, an expert on mountains, especially the Hindu Kush Himalaya. And he has set up, being part of several academic institutes, several very important departments related to this area. Particularly, he was the author of the chapter on the mountains uh, at Agenda 21 during the Rio summit. So, Professor Bandyopadhyay, welcome to the show. And thank you for your time. I know you are extremely busy, but this is a very important subject and I know very close to your heart. So let us talk about the Himalayas and how, let us start with a very open question. How you feel the free India has dealt with Himalaya? Himalayas, part of Himalayas, a major part of Himalayas is in our country. It survives the region, but how we have dealt with it. What's your take?
Yes, this is a very, very significant issue, and we have raised some of the crucial questions related to that issue. Before we go into what are the associated problems with the Himalaya, what are the policy gaps, where policy still needs to be worked out or the existing policy is good enough, I would like to quickly mention that mountains are different from the plains. It is visually different, but scientifically, geographically, geomorphologically, mountains are characterized by some particular quality. The most crucial quality, most vital quality is its vertical formation and sloping landscape. And this applies to all mountains. Now, this is the root cause of many of the problems because any vertical structure is energetically weak. It may be looking very large, it may be looking very big, and but it is internally associated with high potential energy. It always wants to come down. So fragility is a very important limiting factor for the mountains. Now, this is where I come to define Himalaya. Himalaya and Hindu Kush are a joint tectonic landmass. There are other major mountains like the Andes, like the Alps, like the African mountains. There are other mountains, but Himalaya, including the Tibetan plateau, we call it the Hindu Kush Himalaya, which spreads from the Myanmar in the east to Afghanistan in the west. And the Hindu Kush Himalaya part, if we take it out, the Himalayan arc is almost like a geographical arc, okay, which spreads from Afghanistan to the tail end in beyond Arunachal Pradesh into Myanmar. And what is very important is that this arc is also a wall of more than 6,500 meters of average altitude and spread over 2,500 or more kilometers. And this is the creator of the Asian climate. The monsoon comes from the south and it cannot cross the wall of the Himalaya. So it drops much of the water on the face of the Himalaya that the monsoon receives, which is the southern face, and it cannot provide much water on the northern face, where the desert starts, the cold desert of Tibetan Plateau starts, and it is a very, very big landmass, tectonically connected, but in terms of national boundaries, in terms of
Right.
language, in terms of ethnicity, they are very, very different.
Okay.
Now, it is in this condition that we exist today. About 250 million people live in the Hindu Kush Himalaya. And that is not all. The Hindu Kush Himalaya is the source of 10 major rivers of Asia, starting from the Yellow River of China to Yangtze to Mekong, Salwin, Irrawaddy, Brahmaputra, Ganga, Indus, and then Amu Darya and Tarim. Tarim is an internal river of China. So these 10 major rivers provide water to about more than 2 billion people of Asia. And it is very important that this source of water, which at the same time is a protector of major biodiversity, is a protector of major hotspots in biodiversity, it is a climatic divide and source of the life-giving water for more than 2 billion people. It needs to be handled, it needs to be managed with proper knowledge, ecologically informed knowledge, and a system of management that is multidisciplinary.
Has the Himalaya been managed the way that should have been?
No. The answer is no, because management needs a good amount of interdisciplinary knowledge. And Himalaya, till today, very few Himalayan researchers have attempted to understand the Himalaya from a multidisciplinary, holistic perspective. You talk of Himalayan geology, there is a good amount of knowledge. You talk of Himalayan botany, a lot of publications are there. Uh, so every discipline, you talk of Himalayan socioanthropology, there are lots of knowledge on which tribe is talking in which language and what they eat.
Right.
But if you put the whole thing together, what they eat comes from the soil. Production of food needs water.
Right.
Water, as well as in the classical sense, it needs fertilizer, which comes from the forest biomass. So interdisciplinary process of creation of knowledge and utilization of knowledge has been absent. We have a lot
Uh,
of disciplinary knowledge,
but
but
not the interdisciplinary one.
not interdisciplinary, and hence,
I'm coming to that, but
yes,
just in context, as because you has raised the issue. Let us go in context to India's freedom. India being a free country for 79 years. Just in 15th August, we have completed or we started the 79th anniversary of our freedom. The issue is this: a major part of Himalaya is in India, a significant part. Has the I'll be coming to the other countries later, but at this point of time, do you think the free India, the government after government after government in free India, did they give the adequate importance to Himalaya, its policy, its implementation? What's your take on that?
we're giving importance and succeeding in the effective management are two one thing. You can always give importance to something, but you do not know how to handle it.
Absolutely.
There has been a uh, lot of importance given. The Planning Commission, when it was existing, every five-year plan had also an expert group working on the Himalaya. And I was a member of the Himalayan Task Force in one of the 5-year plans. Uh, Possibly it was 2011 onwards. But again, the paucity of knowledge, paucity of expertise who are informed not only of their own discipline, but in a cross-disciplinary context had come as a great obstacle. And not much progress has been made towards that. Every department wants to advance its knowledge according to the departmental line.
but not the
Geology means
integrated one.
geology.
But how we hold the governments responsible? Because end of the day, it is scientists are doing their disciplinary work, but end of the day, it's a policy making institution. The government has the major responsibility or to integrate them and come up with a holistic policy. The politicians in this country, the politicians across last 75, 79 years, do you think that they have given adequate importance to Himalaya?
Verbally, yes. Intellectually questionable, because
And
the
practically not. Not.
practically almost absent. The politicians are, again, Himalaya needs 100 years, 150 years, or 200 years perspective, and politicians do not have anything beyond 5 years of perspective, because that is their uh, every
That's
cycle
the
of their
timeline they
policy.
look. There's a timeline they look, the 5 years.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, also, the scientists have their own limitation. They would not, our whole university system, our education system is geared towards how many journal papers you have published in this discipline. And discipline in social life is very good, but discipline in academic life may not always be good. Discipline means very narrow, strong, one-dimensional knowledge. And
Professor
we,
Bhattabhai, I'll come to this. I'll come to this kind of issue of discipline and issue of how the governments have handled it. But uh, it is nothing new that this allegation has been made that the governments are not really doing adequately for the cause of Himalayas. We have seen long back when people was not talking about climate change, environment, the Chipko movement happened. Sundarlal Bahuganaji, then Chandri Prasad Bhatt, and so many others have pushed that movement. So you have been studying it and kind of extended part of it for a long time. What's your take? That particular movement in 50s, which pushed Dadan Prime Minister Indira Gandhi for some action, but after what happened after that?
well, now that you refer to Chipko, understanding of Chipko is extremely important for any policy making in the context of Himalaya. And unfortunately, academics, journalists, and even political leaders have made a very reductionist description of Chipko. Uh, Chipko has a strong root backwards to the colonial forest policy. When the the British, or you can say the East India Company army, defeated the Gorkha army in the Gorkha War, 1815, 1816, they got control over large areas that was Nepal for several years, but became the British India, that is Kumaon, that is British Garhwal. And these are the areas where the East India Company started its commercial forestry. As a company, it only understood profit, and it wanted to uh, use the forests for commercial felling. Looking at that, the independent king of Tehri Garhwal also started practicing the commercial felling. Commercial felling means protecting some areas for the contractors who would fell the trees, and in turn, it stops the people from entering and using and little harvesting, which is basically firewood, fodder, leaf fodder, and of course the whole issue of water uh, in the mountains comes from the forests. Now, when you go for commercial felling, you protect the interest of the contractors, you restrict the interest of the people. And this led to, in 1930, May 30, 1930, the people of Tehri Garhwal collected in a village called Tilari, and they protested against their almost dislodgement from the forests. And these people, the protesting people, were fired upon by the army of the royal uh, forces of the kingdom of Tehri Garhwal, so-called
Right.
independent, but they were highly influenced by the East India Company. Now, this became a starting point for a conflict between the common people and the king, or common people and the contractors. And over the period, slowly, this was the root of the Chipko movement, that people want their control over forests. People want that their forest products should not go out into the flat plain industries with nothing coming back in terms of money to the local people. This is slowly the became the root of the Chipko movement. We misunderstand Chipko as a spontaneous movement where people came in thousands. Nothing like that had happened. There had been continuous, painstaking organization, both men and women. Among men, the Gandhian activists like Chandri Prasad Bhatji and Kumar Prasunji organized the movement. On the other hand, we have Sallaben and her Lakshmi Ashram in Kosani, creating women activists who actually brought in a cultural revolution among the women of Uttarakhand, who then were the creators of movements like the Madhanishad, which is anti-alcohol, or Madhanishad gave the step forward to women to come out in the Chipko movement in large numbers. So the Chipko has a root, and Chipko suddenly emerged as this economic and environmental movement where local people wanted some amount of timber for their small
Right.
factories, and local women wanted their small amount of fodder, fuel wood collection from the forests.
So it's basically community versus contractor.
Keeping the forests in good health.
It's basically community versus contractor.
Exactly.
So, but that's a fascinating story, and the way you kind of explained it, most people have a different view of Chipko, being seen it in a different light, but you have kind of put the perspectives in an absolutely amazing manner.
When the people started seriously demanding control over forests,
right,
we had this, but led by Bahunaji, a campaign that even if you give it to a local contractor, even if you give it to the local panchayat, you never know, overfelling will not take place. So the campaign was that a total ban on felling can only save the Himalayan forests.
That came later. That came later.
That is what Bahunaji had.
No, but so that came later.
Here came a split between those who want the economic use of the forests in smaller scale for the community, and some supporters of Bahunaji who said that no, nothing doing with any felling.
No
it has
felling,
to be completely stopped.
But the point is, all said and done, Chipko has been a standout moment in India's environmental kind of whole dynamics. But the same Uttarakhand, Professor Bandyopadhyay, now sees a so-called quote-unquote development that is being raging through Himalayas. And we have seen what's happening. We have seen what's happened recently in various places. Previously, also, we have seen in what's happening in Uttarakhand. And many people are saying that the so-called development, the development of, I don't know, you want to get money out of the Himalayas or whatever you want to do, that is pushing Himalayas. So we really do not have Himalaya policy on ground, as you said, but we seem to having a anti-Himalaya policy on ground. How you take
Yes.
what's your take?
When you do not know the mountains properly, you do not know the characteristics of the mountains. About this, I have written extensively. What are the mountain characteristics? You start using theory, economic policy that worked in the plains, and you apply that mechanically in the mountains. Right. And this is where the crisis starts. You change the mountain environment based on what you have done in the plains, and you have earned a lot of money there. So you thought that there also a lot of money going to be earned when you apply the same thing into the mountains. And this is the reason that mountain people are very, very unhappy with the standard practice of development planning in the Himalayas, which includes large dams. Large dams only provide electricity for the flat plains, but it submerges hundreds of villages in the mountains. It stops
But
the access.
But sorry to interrupt you, but the governments argue that unless you have the large dams, you can't do those huge amount of energy that is required for the so-called development of the country again. How you feel about it? What's your
here again the lack of ecology? Large dams, yes, but large dams on what type of rivers?
Right.
The Himalayan rivers are not only carrying water, unlike the more stable mountain systems, including the Western Ghats, they carry a lot of sediment. Now, engineering has to really understand how the flow of water has to be married to flow of sediments so that the sedimentation of the dams, which reduces the dam life drastically and changes the economics of the dams fundamentally, can be understood. I recall that a Chinese water resource minister wrote a book, which I had the opportunity to review. He writes that the main purpose of engineering will be to allow the floodwater to pass to the oceans. Whereas the traditional British engineering that our institutions have taught our students, like the various engineering colleges started by the Englishmen, they do not understand the totality of water. Water has four contents. Water by itself, its chemical composition, energy, because water at a height is full of energy. You let it fall, it gives you energy. That is hydropower. Water, energy, biodiversity. Water always has integrally biodiversity and sediment. If you want water engineering, you have to engineer both water, energy, biodiversity, and sediment. What we are seeing in many of the Himalayan structures in terms of water supply, water storage, a very quick sedimentation. And this is because our knowledge of water hydrology is good, but our knowledge of sedimentology is bad. And with that reductionist in terms of reducing water only to volume cubic and not understanding other biodiversity or sediments, we are unable to take a holistic engineering. And without a holistic engineering, you cannot have successful planning. So in short, the government, ministers, technocrats may have the wish to have good planning. But again, the question is the knowledge base is lacking. And without a proper interdisciplinary knowledge base, there is no possibility of Himalaya being the, the object of successful engineering intervention. Engineering is not bad, but half-baked engineering is definitely not a good thing to use.
Absolutely. Just you were mentioning about the hydropower. Now, one of the problem that being faced now is this the series of hydro powers and dams being kind of installed for hydropower, and there are many people are criticizing uh, those series of hydropowers. What we can see what's happening in Sikkim, in other parts of the Himalayas. So, how do you see these hydropowers? Many people see that this is a solution, but is it a solution or a problem?
Hydropower extraction is a solution because you need power. That you and I are talking is based on possibly some hydropower plant producing electricity, and it is coming through grids to us. So hydropower is needed. But what engineering is used to extract that hydropower?
Right.
If you see that whether it is in Sikkim or any other Himalayan rivers coming to India, the origin, the glacial origin may be at 7,000 feet, 7,000, 6,000 meters. And then it comes to almost flat plains, 200 meters or 300 meters. So this is a very lucrative option for hydropower generation. And you can have stages. You can have small hydropowers repeated again and again along the riverside. But the hydropower is needed mainly in the peak hours. Hydropower is not a flat power generator; it is a peak power generator. It is if you let the tap flow most of the time, you need only for bath. You have an efficiency of 5% to 6%. So our main problem is that the hydropower has to stock the water, and sediment-laden water very quickly fills up the volume that is supposed to stock water. It is now stocking sediment. And even when the water is allowed to flow, like it happens in Kosi, when Kosi comes and touches Ganga, you have a huge delta, internal delta created. And that leads to, according to Nitish Kumar ji, a lot of internal floods in Bihar. Flood water, unlike the Chinese minister, flood water is not able to push out to the oceans. Flood water is stuck by sediment.
So hydropower has a role. They have a role to kind of, I won't use the term kill, but facilitated killing of the river to an extent.
Yes, river producing hydropower flows for 8 hours or 5 hours or 6 hours.
Because they are, Professor Bandabandha, they are supposed to be run of the river projects, but they are never been the run of the river projects. They accumulate the water for a long, long time, as you were pointing out, and only releases in the evening when you have the demand for the power.
Even run of the river projects, they accumulate water for the daytime.
That's what I'm saying.
Maybe 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. or 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. morning hours. You cannot have hydropower running all the time. It is inefficient to do so. So you have to have storage. The storage can be a daily storage. It can also be a weekly storage. depending on the scale of your electricity generation.
Let's come back to Himalaya. I'm coming to the last part of the interview. Uh, Again, coming back to Himalaya policy, you discussed at length about what's happening in India, but you have been part of various international uh, initiatives vis-a-vis Himalayas, in the Kush Himalaya. As you mentioned, as I mentioned on the outset, part of you wrote that chapter on Himalayas in Agenda 21 way back in Rio. Now I was I remember speaking to Shundarlal Bahugunaji long back, and he was referring about the Himalaya policy, and there's no Himalaya policy, and he said that I accepted the Padma Award for the government only with the hope that now perhaps somebody will hear my request about Himalaya policy. What's your take on the Himalaya policy in the transboundary level? You have so many countries being part of the Himalaya. Is there any serious effort to forge proper? I'm not talking about the track two. There may be scientific associations, the ICIMODs and all, but formal government to government Himalaya policy, transboundary level, does it exist, or does it seriously exist on ground?
It doesn't exist. Our diplomacy has to go beyond very nationalistic approach to the Himalayan rivers. And very interestingly, we have two different approach to be taken. Brahmaputra, which originates from river Yarlung Zangpo in Tibet. That's a very dry river in Tibet, which comes to India across the main Himalayan peaks, and then reaches the Indian part or the southern part of the Himalayan slope, receives a lot of monsoon rainfall, and Brahmaputra becomes a big river right from the original in the east called I think the Red River, or uh, all the way to Tista. There are at least 30 or 40 major tributaries to Brahmaputra. When I talk of Ganga, its origin is in Nepal, and much of the Nepal is in the southern slope. It receives a lot of water, unlike Tibet. So it receives a lot of water. It creates high flow and low flow, which our political leaders always say, Nepal is creating flood for Bihar. Nepal has no chance of creating or uncreating floods. It is the natural rainfall pattern, and heavy rainfall always creates flood situation because that rainfall has to flow down. Now, we have to understand the diplomatic approach to a Nepal-India river relation, a China-India Brahmaputra river relation. And in both cases, the river ecology is not understood very well. Okay. We have to understand the river ecology.
And as you mentioned on the outset, that as of now, there has not been any serious effort to forge a transboundary kind of action, a policy on Himalayas, but we should have that.
Well, we should have that, but our attention is more on, oh, that's the bad neighbor. China is, if you go to Guwahati,
we are allowing the geopolitics to come over
absolutely
everything.
And here, Nepal is causing floods in Bihar, and there, China, by a small fraction of diversion, is drying up Brahmaputra. These are hydrologically unstable situations and mass belief. And we need, that is why river ecology to be understood, studied, well researched.
Finally, Professor Bandyopadhyay, you have kind of deliberated, I think, wonderfully as usual about how it kind of transpired over the last 8 decades. What do our government, let's talk about the Indian government, because all said and done, India is the elephant in the room in South Asia. So it's maybe the prerogative of our government to take the call and kind of forge a regional partnership, collaboration on Himalayas. So how you want our government to act on Himalayas? What's your prescription to the government?
I think the rivers should connect two countries, and we should avoid rivers becoming the bone of contention. Rivers are
One of
always
political contention.
political contention. Yes, or that fellow is taking my one mug of water from a big river, and the big river will dry up. That sort of public hysteria. Or Nepal is such a bad fellow that they are opening the floodgates to flood Bihar. Nepal has no such instrument.
Ability to do that.
And they will, hydrologically, you can always find out who is doing what.
I never thought about asking this question on the outset, but as I am hearing you, I know it's a very kind of a very naive way of doing it. But if you are asked that how much number you will give out of 10 to the Free India, the governments in Free India, I'm not talking about this political party or that political party. Overall, from 1947 to till today, 2025, how much number you will give to the Indian governments for out of 10 for working on Himalayas?
Yes, and this
Out of 10,
marking,
how much?
I would go for clubbing the scientific community with the governance.
Right.
Because the government has to have thought process, and that thought process has to be enriched by the scientific community. We have so many large community members in institutions. We have institutions for Himalayan geology. We have National Water Resources Institute, many things. And unfortunately, they all go for disciplinary sort of development lines. And I think I will give, in terms of intention, 6 out of 10, but in terms of ability, 2 out of 10.
6 out of 10 overall.
No, intention. Intention is good,
intention.
but
intention.
ability is poor.
So implementation is 4 and intention is 6.
Yeah, 2 out of 10 for
very interesting
ability.
point, because with this climate change is now all pervading thing, we are talking about this global warming and the glacier melting, it perhaps becomes even more important to have a collective effort to take a policy on Himalayas. So unfortunately, our South Asian countries, as you said, the geopolitics perhaps played a very, I think, a negative role in context, are not doing that. So I think very importantly, the climate change era we are right now in, perhaps India should take the leadership, and this 4 and 6 marks should go close to 8 and 9 to save Himalayas. You agree to that?
Partly because the whole issue of global warming and climate change is a challenge at the global level. If humanity as a whole can succeed in controlling the greenhouse gas emissions, reducing it, bringing it back to the base levels, fine. But if we cannot do that, how much ever India, Nepal, China, they collaborate, if other countries do not help in the process of greenhouse gas.
We can't go beyond the point.
Yeah.
I think it's been fascinating, Professor Bandyopadhyay, usual, and you kind of keep on hearing you on Himalayas. But I think very important, and I hope that these messages will go to where it should have been, to the policymakers, that yes, as you said on the at the very end, that the world has to act together on climate change. Only India, Nepal, Bangladesh, and other countries can't do that in South Asia. But it's very important to start work at home. Very important to start working on the Himalayas that we have, and have at least some policy which will not denigrate Himalayas. Now what we are seeing in Uttarakhand, in Sikkim, how we are abusing Himalaya, if I may use that word. So I think very important to understand that, very important to understand and utilize the scientific evidences that are that are available to use for the Himalaya policy. And we hope that we'll be kind of going to that direction. Thank you for your time, and it's a privilege to talk to you. Thank you.
You're welcome.